Welcome to Find Happiness Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Joanna Johnston, a health coach who specializes in elimination diets. Joanna helps people understand how the food they eat can impact their overall health and well being. Joanna will be sharing her expertise on how to use specific diets to overcome health challenges so you can experience better energy and more productivity. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show as we delve deeper into the world of elimination diets with Joanna Johnson. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so how's your day going?
Well, it's going all right. Thank you for asking.
Okay, great, great.
I have a lot of much better days now that I'm not struggling with depression anymore.
Wow, that's nice. So good to hear. So today you're going to bombard us with so much resources on diets. We can't wait to hear them. Anyway, so I'll shoot. So how did you first become interested in elimination diets as a treatment for depression?
Well, I actually, for depression itself, I discovered it kind of by accident, which is a little ironic since I had already used it for my son who had an autism spectrum condition. And I'd actually been around it for general allergies pretty much my whole life. My mother was allergic to onions growing up. So I just, was used to reading labels and it was a very natural kind of path for me to take with my son, and I'd had depression for such a long time that it actually never occurred to me to use that for depression. I tried changing my diet for other reasons, and it turned out it worked for that. And so then I started looking into it a little bit more and paying more attention to what exactly I was doing and how that was um, actually working to alleviate my depression symptoms.
Hmm. So that was some self-discovery. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that was some
yeah, it really was.
self-discovery. So how did you feel when you found that? Did you feel like one great scientist? Or don't mind me, I'm just trying to kid. How did you feel getting that kind of solution?
Yeah, it was really an amazing discovery for me. As I said, I'd been depressed for a really long time, over 2 decades, in fact. It was just a part of my life and something I thought I was just always going to have to sort of cope with or deal with. And discovering a solution was really just exciting and amazing discovery. Um,
2 decades, 10 years, and then another 10 years. 2 decades. That's been some time. Wow.
mhm. It was basically my whole life at the time.
That's serious. So can you share a personal story of overcoming chronic depression through the use of elimination diet?
Yeah, so what I started doing was, as I said a moment ago, for different reasons, I started playing around with what's known as a ketogenic diet. And I had heard that it could have effects on mood and energy and stuff like that. And I sure could use better mood and more energy when I was depressed. So I went ahead and tried it and really wound up being very effective for that purpose. A lot of people use it for weight loss. That's why it's popular in United States, where I'm from. But um, but it turns out to have a lot of uh, additional effects. And in a ketogenic diet, you eliminate actually almost whole categories of foods. And then my experience with elimination diets, I started paying attention to more specific things in addition to the basic ketogenic structure. So actually now it's been about 3 years, and I still pretty well stick with the dairy-free ketogenic diet.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing this story. It's inspiring to hear how you were able to find relief from depression symptoms through an elimination diet. I'm still I'm still trying to think through. So how do you eliminate also how does elimination diets from other types of diets in treating um, depression?
Right. Well, diet's not actually usually a common treatment for depression. At least where I live, people usually focus on some sort of talk therapy, some sort of medication. Um, Now, the use of medication does recognize that there's some sort of biological component, right? But as with most such solutions, it kind of tries to cover it over and almost pretend it's not there instead of looking for what's causing it. And what I've found with diets is that, that old cliche about you are what you eat, right? Except that what else are you going to be, right? Your cells need raw material to to reproduce themselves and to keep you alive, and that's where it comes from. And so changing what you eat literally changes you at the cellular level. And so that's why I've been able to find such success with elimination diets for so many different things, including my own depression.
Well, I think that it's really important at this point to understand the specific ways in which elimination diets can be beneficial for treatment in depression. A lot of people really need this info, and I'm glad that a resource person like you is here to, give out this info because, I mean, we just eat, we just eat, and we don't have an idea that these things can help with depression and make us feel better. And so this information is it's on point. It's on point. How does an elimination diet help individuals discover which food may be triggering or worsening their depression symptoms?
Well, it definitely turns out there's certain obvious things to think or to start with. When I first started looking into, why was this working, I found that depression is actually associated with a lot of inflammation, and there's a lot of very inflammatory foods that are part of a lot of people's diets, and so that's really where we should start, and that's why. A lot of people who use a ketogenic diet, they'll actually rely very heavily on dairy for their fat content. Um, but dairy is actually pretty inflammatory, and so that's why I actually keep that out, as well as all of the other inflammatory foods that are kind of automatically eliminated by following a ketogenic diet, including all kinds of grains, sugars, and carbohydrates of various kinds. A lot of those can be very inflammatory foods for a lot of people. And it actually turns out if you just go with your um, non-starchy vegetables, nice, clean meats and healthy fats. That's really actually all you need, and you skip all that other inflammatory stuff, which contributes to depression.
So how do you start? Sorry, I need to really get this. How do you start? How do you notice that doing this would? How do you notice it gets you off depression when you start eating these things? Is it something that you just naturally feel, or are there particular signs?
Yeah, so it was super interesting experience because, there's a lot of talk out there, at least in the personal development world, about like what they call limiting beliefs, right? And these are just like sort of repetitive negative thoughts that we have about ourselves, right? That like, I don't know, nobody likes me, or this kind of thing, right? And what I noticed was after I had implemented this diet, I just noticed after a period of time that I just really wasn't having those thoughts anymore. And it was actually super strange for me because, as I said, I'd been depressed for a really long time. I would have said I believed these things. And I actually like can't even think them anymore. Like I could try, and it's just like, oh, that's weird. That doesn't make any sense. But these were these like repetitive thoughts that were there for me like all the time, to the point where I would have said I believe them.
Oh,
They actually just went away.
okay. Wow. I'm I'm speechless. I never would have thought that dieting and all that can affect depression. I was only thinking that depression would be caused by different other factors that we have out there. Maybe um, not being happy with several things happening in life and all that. And, Wow, this is
Well, and
great education.
there's definitely a difference between chronic depression, like what I had, which just like goes on and on for like years and even decades, and the sort of um uh, temporary kind of depression that happens when you do experience something really awful in your life. And I believe it's almost a normal coping mechanism for us to feel that way for a little while, but it's when it doesn't go away, right? And it really starts to interfere with your life. That I mean, it's normal to have a lot of sadness and even depression, like if somebody dies, or if you're in some awful situation like war, right? That it's a normal coping mechanism to help us, give us time to process what's happening to us. But it should kind of go away almost without a lot of help after a while. Uh, and if it doesn't, that's when we need to think about some of these other things that may be contributing to keeping it there, keeping us in that negative place.
Hmm. Well, that's a great explanation. It's so important for people to understand how to identify which food may be causing problems for them. Okay, so what are some common misconceptions about elimination diets and depression, and how can they be addressed?
Well, I think the biggest misconception about an elimination diet is that it's a temporary thing. You hear about it for a variety of different conditions, and what they'll suggest is actually what's called an elimination challenge. And you might need to do that once or twice, but really, if getting rid of the food is helping you alleviate your symptoms, the purpose of the challenge is to see if they come back, but they nearly always do. And so typically, if you're getting results from eliminating certain foods, it is because your body personally is reacting to those things. And, I'll give you another cliche: one man's food is another man's poison, right?
Mhm.
Just because other people seem to eat these things and be fine, it's a very personalized experience. If you don't feel good on this stuff, then you should eliminate it pretty well permanently.
Oh, great. I think it's really important. It's a really important topic to discuss because it's helpful to clear up any misconceptions people may have about how elimination diets can help with depression. It's good to clear it out there. One man's food is another man's poison. I don't have any valid example here, though, but I think that there are certain food that I eat. When I eat them, it doesn't go down well with me, and then someone else will just eat and be fine. So I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. So, how can individuals who are struggling with depression and want to really try elimination diet get to start, and what should they be prepared for?
Well, as I said, I had the most success with the starting with the ketogenic diet,
Okay.
and then from there I would look at eliminating additional inflammatory foods. And again, for me, the biggest one was dairy. And you do also have to be careful on a ketogenic diet. Sometimes people will increase their fat intake, but they'll be using the wrong kinds of fats. And some of the what are called the polyunsaturated fats. Those are basically just like all your liquid oils and stuff. They can actually be inflammatory if you're using too much of them. So you really want to stick with your saturated fats. And At least where I come from, we've been fed a big myth about how saturated fat is bad for you, and it's actually the exact opposite. The hydrogenated fats that are made out of those vegetable oils, those are definitely bad for you, but those are actually the trans fats. They're not the same as saturated fats at all.
Also, you have a lot of people you do this for, or like a few people you you administer such to.
So I can work with people to help figure out like what are their specific um, issues with different foods. There's a couple
Mhm.
of tests that I recommend that people can get, and that kind of thing. that if people are interested in learning more, it is a very individualized process, especially for something like depression. It's very going to be very personal, and I don't have like a program or anything because I really don't believe it's a one size fits all kind of solution. I can make some kind of general suggestions, and that's what I'm doing here today of where you might start. But yeah, I can definitely consult with people if they are looking for more individualized information about that.
Oh, okay. So going deeper, can you share some success stories of individuals you've worked with who have seen improvements in their depression symptoms through the use of an elimination diet? Just whatever stories you have.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Well, so um, with my own depression, the really defining feature of it was that it had just been a part of my life for such a long time,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I didn't even think of doing an elimination diet for that. But what I had been doing for about the past 10 years
Mm-hmm.
was working with my son, who had an autism spectrum diagnosis. And I was using elimination diets with him. We did one of the tests that I recommended. We actually eliminated over 66 foods at one point that he was reactive to, and that the constellation of all that reactivity was actually what was creating most of his autism symptoms. And so he'll probably always be my best success story. But I've also helped people use elimination diets for diabetes and for a variety of lesser conditions, including thyroid issues and even snoring.
Wow. So hearing these real life success stories is always encouraging. People would want to hear that this works. And thanks for these examples. And this makes a lot of sense to me. So, how can
Yeah, it's
people
super
make?
fascinating because,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was going to say it's super fascinating because um, you know, if you take that cliche seriously, you are what you eat, then what that means is you can literally use an elimination diet no matter what you're dealing with. Now, the details of that diet are going to be different depending on what it is that you're dealing with, but elimination diets, they can literally work for everything.
Yeah, I totally
And so
agree.
that's what I think is most fascinating about it.
Oh, nice. So, how can people maintain a healthy diet or maintain healthy and balanced diet while eliminating certain foods? And what are some of the tips for success in treating depression through elimination diet?
For sure. Well, I definitely think it's actually really valuable to really take some of these cliches seriously. The idea that, what's a healthy diet for you is not necessarily a healthy diet for me, and that we really have to take a lot of personal responsibility and just take on figuring out what that is for us and paying attention to how we feel, after every meal, and just developing that habit of, when we don't feel so good, instead of just like, chalking it up to some kind of, diagnosis or something that happened, maybe you can say, well, what did I eat? Because sometimes, depending on what we ate, we might respond to a certain situation in a completely different way, right? That might be a stressful situation. And, if we're eating the right things and taking care of our bodies, we're actually better able to deal with the stressful situations that come into our lives. And so I really believe it's a very individualized kind of thing. And my best tip for everybody is to just start paying attention to how do you feel, 30 minutes or 2 hours after, every kind of meal, every kind of snack, and just start asking yourself, is that really food for me? Because when you go to feed your pet, your dog, let's say, right, and you open up that can and it says Alpo or something on it, and right, and you go to dump that can out in the dog's bowl. Dog thinks it's great, right? He loves it, but you don't think that looks like food. for you at all, right? And so developing that kind of relationship to these things that are not foods for us personally, right? Where you just look at it, it's like, that's just not even food. I'm not going to eat that. It might as well be dog food.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. It's important to find a balance and make sure that elimination diets are done in healthy and sustainable ways. Thank you.
It's very important too to come up with replacements,
Hmm.
and it doesn't have to be a direct replacement. A lot of people think that they have to, if they eliminate something, they have to kind of come up with some sort of like pretend version that, of course, is never as good as the real thing. Um, but I prefer uh, to really look for replacements that are actually different, and take the opportunity to explore new foods. When we eliminated the 66 foods from my son's diet, we were like, we had to figure out different stuff. A bunch of stuff was just completely off the list, and we had to figure out what else to do instead. And so instead of trying to pretend that the new foods were the old foods, we just explored new foods instead. So I find that to be really, really helpful as well.
That's really awesome. That's really awesome. Trying different things, and the good thing is you were getting solution. Right now, you're here trying to, not even trying to bring in solution to a lot of people who will be having same issues, and that's one of the reasons why I find happiness is here. There are a lot of people don't have access to such resources, and when they get to this point, they just blow it out of proportion or go from amber to red. So bringing them back to green, taking this kind of resources from people like you, and this is awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. So therefore, can you discuss to the role of gut-brain connection on depression and how elimination diets can improve it?
Yeah, it's actually super important. A lot of our mood is actually controlled by some of the um, microorganisms that actually live in our intestinal tract. And if those get unbalanced, those little creatures in there, they actually produce substances that can talk to our brain and ask us for the foods that they want. And so a lot of times folks who have trouble with things like depression and other inflammatory conditions will be unbalanced in this way, and they'll actually have sugar cravings and things that are not actually coming from them. They're actually coming from those microorganisms, especially yeasts and things that live in their intestinal tract. And so, if you can actually use your mind to overcome those signals and to say no, to those unbalanced microorganisms, you can help balance them by taking probiotics and adding new things in there, and and actually regaining that balance is a very important part of why this kind of elimination diet does work for depression symptoms. It's because all that happens kind of underneath the surface, and you don't necessarily have to address it directly. Just using the diet will allow that to happen kind of naturally.
Hmm. This is a really fascinating topic. It's important to understand the connection between the gut and the brain and how an elimination diet can impact that connection. I never knew this, and I'm still even going to go back to this to really get that into my head. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, what are some of the common triggers of depression that can be addressed through the use of an elimination diet?
Most certainly. Well, food is actually a trigger, and I think if people try this, they'll realize it for themselves. I can really actually feel, if I've had, some kind of inflammatory food or, too much of something, because I'll just, some of that stuff will start to come back. Some of those thoughts, some of that anxiety, some of that just like down mood will start to come back. And so it really is the kind of thing that you got to pay attention to. And for some of us, we have to do it for life. I'm definitely a lifer, and my son is as well. He doesn't have too much in the way of autism symptoms anymore. And I'll have a kind of a bad day, and I'll notice, oh, I went to that restaurant. Maybe I won't order that again next time. Things like this.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's a valuable information. It's important to know what to look out for and what foods to eliminate to help alleviate depression symptoms. But I still have one very serious question for you. Um, so, talking to depression generally, what would you advise people going through depression to do? Like, what do you think? And what's your advice for them? And how do they get off depression? Just generalize it and these words.
Yeah. Well, what I love about the diet approach is that it really doesn't waste a lot of time. If it's going to work, it works in fairly short order, few days to weeks. Some people will spend, months or even years in some of these other treatments, drugs and therapy and this kind of stuff that really doesn't actually address the underlying cause. And if we are what we eat and we keep on eating junk, we're going to feel like junk. So just try it, it really can't hurt. That's what I love most about this approach is, you don't need a prescription, you don't need, doctor's orders. You can just try it, and either it works or it doesn't, but um typically if you keep trying, and you try a little bit different things, um I had the most success with the ketogenic diet because it got rid of so many of the inflammatory foods all at once, um, that I was really able to see um, a serious change within about 4 to 5 weeks of doing this. So if you just take on as an experiment, changing your diet for a few weeks, and just see if you don't see some results.
Mm, okay. Well, so because of time, this brings us to a wrap for today. So, can you share your contact information so our viewers who really want to get to you can reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. You can send me an email. My personal email is coach
Mhm.
at simpledietexpert.com. And I'm sure we could put that in the show notes. Just send me an email and tell me that you heard me on the Find Happiness podcast, and I'd love to answer your questions or point you in the direction of some of my other services and offerings.
Wow, great. So, thanks a lot, Joanna. Thanks a lot for all the information and resources you have shared on us. I'm grateful. We're grateful for your insights and deep knowledge shared with our guests. Um,
Thank you so much for having me.
yeah. So, and to our guests, thanks for watching. We hope you've learned enough from this very educating section, especially how to eat right and drive depression as far as possible. Until next time, stay happy. Bye.